Vanessa Mitchell could no longer hear the clattering footsteps of passengers in the first-class lounge. The silence was so profound that every tap of a teacup on the table, every rustle of a newspaper page echoed like a warning. Then a hoarse, arrogant voice rang out, "Who allowed this person to sit here?" An older man, tall, wearing an expensive Zegna suit, eyes red with anger, stared directly at her, as if she were a mere obstacle blocking his path. Vanessa, 44, remained perfectly still, her gaze cold, unreactive. Inside a whirlwind of calculation and strategy was forming slow, silent, yet powerful and untouchable. She closed her eyes, retracing each step of her journey over the past more than 10 years, building Mitchell Stratos Ventures from nothing, from cramped offices in Manhattan to influence over the global financial stage. She had encountered countless people who underestimated her managers and colleagues, who dismissed her for being a black woman entering boardrooms where power was parceled by wealth and skin color. But at this moment, she had yet to reveal a fraction of her true power. One misstep, one hint of concession, and everything could be lost. The man, Harrison Blake, 50, had no idea that the woman sitting before him was far more than a first-class passenger. She owned 49% of Skybridge Airlines, the very airline he was flying on, and she was preparing to close an acquisition of a European competitor. Yet Blake saw only a casually dressed woman in a charcoal grey tracksuit, a small leather bag, entirely ordinary and unassuming. He sneered, confident that his wealth alone would assert dominance. Behind him, other passengers paused, staring, some secretly filming on their phones. In the cabin, the airline crew Cynthia Harris, 39, senior purser, with her hair tightly coiled, a stern expression, stood poised to obey Blake. Every eye was on Vanessa, some curious, some dismissive. They had no idea what was coming, and they would soon pay for their misjudgment. Vanessa opened her eyes. Her heart beat calm, every fiber of her body ready to react. She looked directly at Blake, her voice calm, measured, unmistakable in authority. "My boarding pass says 1A. I am Dr. Vanessa Mitchell." Blake's eyes widened, his face flushed. "A doctor, shopping cart doctor," he spat with a mocking sneer. Vanessa did not flinch, did not smile, did not explain. Only her eyes, sharp and piercing, surveyed his intentions. Cynthia Harris inhaled unease spreading through her. She had dealt with hundreds of first-class passengers, but none had ever unsettled her like this. There was something in Vanessa's gaze, in her stillness, in every line of her face, that radiated a power neither she nor Blake could yet comprehend, a low, burning fear creeping through the cabin. Harrison stepped closer, voice sharper and louder. "She is obstructing the flight. Move her." Vanessa inhaled deeply, the tension slicing like a knife, yet she remained composed. In her mind, every scenario was calculated. A hasty reaction would let Blake win. Accepting humiliation would secure her larger victory. She chose restraint. She would give up the seat only in form. The real strategy was unfolding silently, legal and corporate action already in motion. She rose slowly, holding her leather portfolio, looking Cynthia in the eye. "What is your full name?" Vanessa asked, deep and commanding. The purser froze, eyes wide. Before she could answer, Vanessa turned to Blake. "And you are Harrison Blake of Blake Capital. I will not forget a single second of today." Blake was taken aback. No one had ever looked at him like that. No one knew she was the real authority. A twist occurred immediately. Vanessa walked past first class into economy, seating herself at 22B, the middle seat squeezed next to a snoring passenger. Eyes followed her curiously, some frowning, but no one recognized her. Blake believed he had won, unaware that in just a few hours, real power would reverse everything. Vanessa opened her laptop, activated Wi-Fi, and began sending emails to legal human resources and compliance teams. Ben Harper, 24, a flight attendant who had observed everything, would serve as a witness. She prepared data documentation and a plan to hold Blake, Cynthia, and the entire first-class crew accountable. In the cabin, Ben stood silently, heart-pounding hands, trembling, understanding that a single signature, a single honest report, could make both a VIP passenger and erring crew pay. Vanessa did not shout. She did not act violently, but her strategy was in motion, gearing up for the next climax. Project Atlas, the pending acquisition, would proceed, uninterrupted. Blake remained oblivious, thinking Vanessa was just another passenger in 22, yielding silently. In reality, every gesture, every move he made was meticulously documented, each detail fueling the true power Vanessa commanded. His irritation and arrogance were fueling the very force that would soon overtake him. Vanessa gazed out the window, watching the sunset glint across the ocean-red light, shimmering over the wing like a warning. In that moment, she felt the weight of real power, not in a suit, not in wealth, but in preparation, patience, and vision. Blake would pay. Cynthia Harris would pay. And anyone who had underestimated her would find there was no escape from the vortex she controlled. Her heartbeat remained steady, yet a storm brewed within. She scanned the cabin, passengers, curious glances, subtle gestures, the quiet sounds of the aircraft. Every element was data for her strategic plan. A faint smile touched her lips, visible only to her. Those who underestimated her today would bow before her true power tomorrow. The tension reached its peak as the announcement for landing in London sounded. Vanessa closed her eyes, inhaled deeply, sensing each breath, each heartbeat of the passengers around her. This was only the beginning. The real battle, the consolidation of power and the precise reckoning, would commence the moment she set foot in England. She knew with certainty that no one could anticipate what was about to unfold. As the 777 began taxiing toward the runway, Vanessa Mitchell remained seated upright, hands resting on her leather portfolio, eyes fixed on her laptop screen. Around her, the sounds of boarding gradually gave way to the deep roar of the engines, the scraping of wheels on asphalt, and the muted murmurs of first-class passengers. Yet Vanessa heard nothing but her own heartbeat, steady and cold. Everything else was merely the backdrop for the plan. She had meticulously prepared a precise sequence of actions that would transform the humiliation of Seat 22B into a weapon of power. Ben Harper, the 24-year-old flight attendant, stood silently near first-class hands, trembling slightly, but eyes bright and alert. He observed Harrison Blake with visible satisfaction, unaware that every derisive word, every dismissive gesture was being recorded, analyzed, and would backfire spectacularly. Vanessa had studied him for hours. Ben was the perfect witness. No one else knew the full truth, but he was the key. If he performed his role correctly, this incident would evolve from a personal affront into irrefutable proof of discrimination and abuse of authority. Blake remained confident in his first class. Seat eyes, bloodshot mouth curled in a smug smile, believing power resided with him. He did not realize that true power was not in a Zegna suit or a platinum card, but in the composure, meticulousness, and long-term preparation that Vanessa commanded. She had spent her life mastering silence, in the face of underestimation, while remaining ready to strike with a force her adversaries could never anticipate. Vanessa opened an email on her laptop, sending it to the legal and human resources teams at Mitchell Stratos Ventures. Subject line TAA 214, Incident Report and Required Action. Each act of Blake, each word, every move by Cynthia Harris, meticulously documented by Ben Harper, was encoded, categorized, and scheduled for follow-up upon landing. No mistakes, no lapses. This was no ordinary flight. It was a battle of intellect, and Vanessa was prepared to win completely. Meanwhile, Ben typed silently into his tablet hands, shaking eyes bright with purpose, fully aware he was holding the fate of an entire airline in his hands. He recalled every word of Blake, every condescending glance, every sweetie dripping with mockery. He knew that a single honest report now could save the airline from abuse while protecting himself from being drawn into a corrupt power game. Cynthia Harris, 39, senior purser, stood near Blake's seat lips, pressed tight, a creeping unease running through her. She was accustomed to controlling the cabin, managing first-class passengers, even intimidating them to give up their seats. But now, in Vanessa's presence, she sensed an unpredictable authority. A cold shiver ran down her spine. The woman before her was no ordinary passenger, her gaze silent yet capable of toppling anyone. The aircraft lifted off. Pressure increased the engine's roar, blending into the tense rhythm of the cabin. Blake remained self-assured, unaware that every action of his was being logged. Vanessa glanced out the window. Sunset glinting on the ocean-red light scattering across the wing, her heart beat steady cold. She thought of Project Atlas, the European acquisition, the plan 18 months in the making, realizing that this moment would determine everything. 1 minute of humiliation, one wrong move, and the entire strategy could collapse. She opened her eyes wider, scanning the first-class cabin, passengers exchanging glances, some filming surreptitiously, others scornful. She paid no attention. Each moment was data. She measured the pressure, arrogance, and confidence of Blake. Every act of his was part of the calculation. Vanessa memorized every laugh, every gaze, every word. They were irrefutable evidence of discrimination. Vanessa tilted her head, opening another email to the London legal team, requesting preparation of a case against Blake Capital for racial discrimination, defamation, and interference with Project Atlas. Everything was in place, legal team evidence, witnesses, and a plan to intervene immediately upon landing. Not a single detail was overlooked. A meticulous power play awaited any misstep by the opposition. Blake sat confidently smiling, oblivious that the plan had turned him into prey. His self-satisfaction and false sense of authority would collapse within hours. Vanessa remained seated, calm, her gaze distant. Her composure was her greatest weapon. Every provocation, every mocking word, every dismissive gesture was transformed into fuel for retaliation to strike with perfect timing. Ben Harper stood nearby, heart racing. He understood he was witnessing history, a moment of true justice. Every word from Blake, every glance from Cynthia, every gesture of the first-class passengers was being meticulously recorded for use when needed. One tap, one honest report, and everything would turn upside down. Vanessa looked at Blake, eyes sharp as a blade, voice calm but resolute. "Remember everything you do today." "I will not forget." Blake frowned, a strange feeling creeping in, yet he did not realize, nor could he ever imagine, that the ordinary-looking woman before him was the half-owner of the airline, the one about to change the entire game. Cabin pressure increased as passengers settled, crew busied themselves, but Vanessa remained the focal point, an invisible threat. Every gesture, every action she took was calculated. Time, space, and power were all in her hands. The plot twist unfolded quietly. All those who had underestimated her had yet to realize it. But now they were trapped within the vortex of power Vanessa had created. The aircraft crossed the Atlantic red light, spilling over the wing. Vanessa opened her notebook, listing passengers' staff, and all evidence needed to handle every eventuality. Blake thought he was winning, but in reality, the entire strategy had been flawlessly executed. Every subsequent action he took only clarified Vanessa's authority, each moment recorded with precision. Ben stood silently, hands trembling, heart pounding, yet eyes shining. He knew that if he acted honestly, the crew would face irrefutable truth. Every discriminatory act, every mocking word would become undeniable evidence. Vanessa seated in 22. Be calm, yet, within her, a storm of power was ready to erupt. As the sunset light reflected on the airplane windows, Vanessa smiled faintly. The humiliation at seat 22B had become a weapon. The real battle Project Atlas and the intelligent revenge would begin the moment the plane touched the ground. No one could anticipate it. No one could escape. Everything was set for the final confrontation. As the aircraft began its descent, the wind whistled across the wings, and the grey morning light of London started filtering into the cabin. Vanessa Mitchell remained still, notebook on her laptop at her side, each heartbeat synchronized with the engine's rhythm. Seat 22B was cramped and uncomfortable, yet not once did she lose her composure. Every click of the wheels, every whisper from the economy passengers became the metronome for the whirlwind of her thoughts. Project Atlas, the European acquisition power, entirely within her grasp. Blake, confident and arrogant, still occupied his first-class seat, smiling smugly, completely unaware that every act of condescension he made was being meticulously recorded. Vanessa observed him, every gesture, every glance, every curl of his lip, all analyzed in precise detail. She knew Blake believed he was winning, yet in reality every move he made was driving him further into a perfect trap of power. Ben Harper, 24, stood tucked near the first-class cabin hands, trembling but eyes bright and alert. He was the most crucial witness to all misconduct. Every word, every action of Blake, every expression of disdain or compliance from Cynthia Harris was being logged carefully. Each piece of data, each bit of evidence would become a weapon in Vanessa's hands the moment she revealed her true authority. Vanessa opened her laptop, sending encrypted emails, one to the legal team, one to human resources, and one to Ben Harper. Each message detailed every word and every action of Blake and Harris, meticulously compiled into a formal record. She instructed Ben to report fully and truthfully, without sharing with anyone else. All evidence was prepared, so that upon landing she could act immediately, leaving nothing overlooked. Inside the cabin, Blake remained confident, looking around at the passengers, smirking with pride, oblivious that true power did not reside in a first-class seat, a platinum card, or his mocking laughter, but in the calm, precise strategy Vanessa had cultivated for months. She sat silently, yet in her mind, every step, every email, every click had been calculated to overturn the entire situation once they touched down. Vanessa observed Cynthia Harris, 39, senior purser anxiety creeping into her composed face. She had been accustomed to managing the cabin, controlling first-class passengers, even intimidating them to yield their seats. But now, in Vanessa's gaze, she realized she no longer controlled the situation. Every ounce of confidence and authority she had relied upon wavered. Vanessa remained seated, calm, silent, Yet the power radiating from her eyes forced Cynthia to retreat, while Blake remained completely unaware. Vanessa opened another email, sending it to the London legal team preparing a case against Blake Capital for racial discrimination, defamation, and obstruction of Project Atlas. All evidence was ready: Ben's reports, staff records, interaction logs, and cabin video. Everything was set to act immediately upon landing. Blake continued sitting smiling, believing he was victorious. Yet every action he took was being observed by Vanessa. Every heartbeat, every glance, every word converted into data for a strategic counterattack. Vanessa was calm, but within her, a storm of power was accumulating, waiting for the precise moment to erupt. The aircraft approached London Heathrow. Vanessa closed her eyes, inhaled deeply, sensing the tension and energy in the cabin. This was only the beginning. Once on the ground, everything would change. Project Atlas would be protected. Blake would be held accountable. The errant staff would face consequences, and Vanessa's true power would be revealed. Every move, every action from this point forward was part of her meticulous calculation. The morning light reflected across the airplane wings. Vanessa opened her notebook, preparing movement plans, legal strategy, and human resources interventions. Every detail from seat 22B, from Blake's gestures, from Cynthia's eyes, was recorded. The twist unfolded silently. All who had underestimated her were now entering a vortex of power they had never anticipated. And upon landing, everything would explode. No one could escape. The 777 shuddered lightly as it touched down at London Heathrow, the wheels scraping the runway like a prelude to the next climax. Vanessa Mitchell remained seated in 22B, calm hands on her notebook, eyes fixed on her laptop screen. The passengers around her had yet to realize anything, but Vanessa knew that this moment would determine the outcome of the entire power struggle. Every breath, every movement, every sound in the cabin was meticulously recorded and calculated for her next move. Blake remained confident in first class, smiling arrogantly, unaware that each condescending gesture he made was being logged. Vanessa observed him carefully, every motion, every glance, every smirk analyzed in detail. She knew he thought he had won, believing Vanessa to be a yielding passenger. Yet, in truth, real power did not reside in an expensive suit, a platinum card, or derisive laughter. It lay in preparation, in meticulous observation, and in the ability to act decisively when the time came. Vanessa had transformed the humiliation at seat 22B into a weapon. Ben Harper. 24 stood silently near first-class hands, trembling but eyes bright. He was the most critical witness to every wrongdoing. Every word, every action of Blake, every scrutinizing or disdainful glance from Cynthia Harris was being documented. A single truthful report would expose all abuse, and Ben understood that now he was not just witnessing history, he was helping to create it. Vanessa opened her laptop once more, sending a series of encrypted emails, one to the London legal team, instructing them to prepare a case against Blake Capital for racial discrimination, defamation, and obstruction of Project Atlas. Another to Human Resources, with a full record of first-class crew misconduct, and a third directly to Ben Harper, demanding a detailed and truthful report to be completed before landing. Every detail was logged: times, words, glances, and every transgression of Blake and Harris. Cynthia Harris. 39 senior purser stood near Blake, unease creeping in. She had long been accustomed to controlling the cabin, managing first-class passengers, and asserting authority over staff. But now, in Vanessa's gaze, she realized she no longer controlled the situation. Vanessa's cold, sharp eyes forced her to step back, unable to command or manipulate Blake as she had before. The plane slid along the runway, gradually entering the gate. Blake began to sense something strange. Vanessa was no ordinary passenger. No shouting, no resistance. Yet the authority she radiated left him unsettled. His arrogance and self-satisfaction began to fade into simmering confusion, though he did not yet understand why. Vanessa rose, picking up her bag and notebook. She walked past first class, under the scrutinizing eyes of passengers. Blake still believed he had triumphed, unaware that this moment marked the start of a sequence that would overturn the established power within the airline. Each step Vanessa took was deliberate, her path, her pace, her measured silence, the authority quietly emanating from her. Ben Harper observed every step, hands trembling, but resolve firm. He understood that his report would determine the fate of Blake of Cynthia and of the entire first-class cabin. One signature, one truthful note, and all abusers would pay. Vanessa passed by him, their eyes meeting, silently conveying, "Do this right, and everything will change." As the aircraft doors opened, the cold London morning rushed in, passengers bustling and wheeling luggage. Vanessa did not hurry. She walked deliberately, observing every action, every reaction from the staff. Blake faked a smile, oblivious that true power was ready to strike. Vanessa stepped off the boarding stairs, heading toward the diplomatic exit. A black Bentley Mulsanne awaited. No staff, no first-class passengers recognized her. She called via the internal phone system, reporting her location and preparing for an urgent meeting at the Sky Bridge headquarters. Everything was ready, legal human resources evidence and witnesses. Blake Capital would have no chance to interfere with Project Atlas. Cynthia Harris lingered, trembling with quiet fear. She realized the authority she once wielded had been completely usurped. Every frown, every scrutinizing glance, every command she had used to control the cabin now meant nothing. Vanessa, with absolute calm, had flipped the board. All staff with improper conduct would be held accountable. Inside the Bentley, Vanessa looked over London through the windshield, the grey morning light reflecting off the streets. She breathed deeply, heart steady, yet within a storm of power, was poised to erupt. This was no longer about Seat 22B, no longer about the first-class cabin. This was the moment when every transgression would be exposed, every arrogant individual would face consequences, and Project Atlas would be fully protected. As the Bentley approached Skybridge headquarters, Vanessa checked her emails one final time. Ben Harper's report had been submitted, all evidence compiled, ready for the emergency meeting. Blake, in the first-class cabin, moments ago, still believed he had won. Yet no one had realized Vanessa never loses. She had turned humiliation into a weapon, calm into authority, and everything was poised to erupt the moment she entered the boardroom. Every step, every heartbeat, every action had been prepared for a climax no one could predict. True power did not reside in first-class seats or platinum cards, but in strategy observation and the ability to act with precision. Blake Cynthia and all who had underestimated Vanessa were about to confront a force they had never seen before. Vanessa entered Skybridge headquarters, eyes cold, composed, silent, yet her quiet authority radiated through the room, freezing every employee in place. She knew that in just a moment, every misdeed would be revealed, every abuse of power punished, and Project Atlas would stand as a testament to her intelligent, precise, and undeniable command. Vanessa Mitchell stepped into the Skybridge Airlines boardroom, each footfall deliberate, Yet authority radiated from her like a silent storm, freezing everyone in the room. The long mahogany table stretched before the most powerful figures in the company. Robert Pace, the official CEO, sat at the head of the table, lips pressed tight eyes, a mix of curiosity and worry. Sarah Jenkins, head of cabin services, trembled, lips quivering, knowing that this meeting would be unlike any she had ever attended. Vanessa opened her eyes, taking in every detail. Every glance, every gesture was logged in her mind like a map of power. Harrison Blake, of Blake Capital, the man who had belittled her on the flight, was now escorted into the room by security. His eyes still exuded confidence, but Vanessa recognized the first signs of doubt. He had never faced her true authority. Blake thought he was merely confronting a VIP passenger, yet he had entered the domain of the real owner, Cynthia Harris. 39 senior purser stood with the crew lips pressed tight, trying to maintain composure, yet her eyes betrayed panic. She had once taken pride in controlling the cabin, arranging first-class seating, and manipulating passengers, but now before Vanessa's gaze, all that authority was meaningless. Every moment of contempt she had shown, every dismissive remark, now stood as irrefutable evidence. Vanessa stood at the head of the table, silent for a moment, commanding all eyes. The faint rustle of paper, the ticking of the wall clock, and soft breaths were the only sounds. She spoke deliberately, voice cold yet sharp. "I have received a detailed report from first-class cabin flight 214. Every action, every word, every glance has been recorded." The room fell silent, hearts racing, no one daring to interrupt. She began presenting the incident. Harrison Blake had unlawfully interfered, compelling cabin staff to move her from seat 1A based on fabricated privileges and personal prejudice. Cynthia Harris had participated, abusing her authority, showing contempt and attempting to coerce her out of her seat. The evidence from Ben Harper, 24, the young flight attendant, was central. He recorded every word, every action, every discriminatory or preferential behavior. Robert Pace, CEO, sat agape. He had never seen direct proof of unfairness and abuse of authority in first class, and now it was all before him. Sarah Jenkins, head of cabin services, went pale, guilt creeping over her. Every decision she had made to protect the image of first class was now evidence against herself. Vanessa approached each staff member, weighing every look, every breath, every gesture. She began with Cynthia Harris. "You participated in coercing passengers based on assumptions about skin color and attire. This behavior violates company policy and the law." Cynthia attempted to speak, voice trembling thiapheth. "That was a mistake, Vanessa cut her off, sharply, voice like a blade. "There was no mistake. Every action of yours was recorded and verified." Blake looked around, fear beginning to seep in. His false authority, built on wealth and a first-class seat, was meaningless. Vanessa stared him down, voice like steel. "Harrison Blake, your actions on the recent flight constitute illegal interference with service, racial discrimination, and obstruction of business. You will no longer have freedom to board any Skybridge flights. All contracts and privileges of Blake Capital related to the airline will be reviewed and suspended immediately." The room fell silent. Blake, mouth agape, could not respond. Vanessa continued. "Cynthia Harris, you are terminated immediately. Evidence from Ben Harper cabin reports and cameras confirm unprofessional, biased, and discriminatory behavior. All records will be forwarded to legal authorities if necessary." Ben Harper stood silently, eyes bright, both nervous and exhilarated. He knew that his honesty had preserved justice. Vanessa turned to Ben. "Your task today was truthfulness and precision. You did exactly right. You will be promoted, immediately leading the new cabin training program." Ben froze, heart racing, unable to believe it. Every hour of observation and documentation was now recognized, and his authority and reputation had soared. Vanessa did not stop. She stepped to Blake, still stunned. She stood before him, taller, more commanding. "You thought you could belittle me, force me from my seat, and disrupt Project Atlas. You were wrong. Power does not reside in a suit, a platinum card, or reputation. It resides in preparation, observation, and precise action. You have destroyed your own authority." Blake trembled, mouth stiff, unable to speak. Security escorted him out his steps, no longer imposing. Cynthia Harris, standing beside him, still could not believe her eyes. The woman she had coerced and disdained now held absolute authority. No words, no pleading, only silent and decisive judgment. Vanessa returned to the head of the table, calm, emphasizing to the board, "Project Atlas will proceed as planned. Any interference, any violators will be held accountable. This is not just a lesson for cabin staff or VIP passengers. This marks the beginning of a culture of fairness, transparency, and properly exercised authority throughout the airline." Every gaze in the boardroom focused on Vanessa. Robert Pace exhaled, amazed and impressed. Sarah Jenkins trembled, guilt flooding her. Ben Harper stood tall, proud. Blake had been fully neutralized. His false authority evaporated, and the entire first-class cabin system overturned. Vanessa, through calm strategy, had both exacted revenge and asserted her power, ensuring Project Atlas would be fully protected. The meeting concluded. Vanessa looked around, voice steady and firm. "Remember, true power does not lie in titles or formal authority. It lies in observation, patience, and acting at the right moment. Those who act with integrity will be protected and respected. Those who abuse authority or discriminate will face consequences." Blake left the room stunned, mouth agape, realizing that arrogance and false authority had led to his total defeat. Cynthia Harris remained pale, understanding that every wrongdoing she committed had been exposed and could not be justified. Ben Harper, young yet truthful, had been promoted and had become a symbol of ethics and fairness in the airline. Vanessa sat at the control panel confirming corrective measures. All flight data cabin reports and legal documentation had been uploaded into the system. Project Atlas would proceed without obstruction. Skybridge Airlines had now entered a new era, fair, transparent, and properly governed authority. A faint smile crossed Vanessa's lips. The climax had concluded, but her power still radiated. Those who had once underestimated or abused authority now had to bow to true power, quiet, sharp, and precise. Every strategy, every restraint, every observation had transformed into perfect victory. And Project Atlas, the operation restructuring the entire European airline order, was now securely in her hands, untouchable and absolute. Vanessa Mitchell stepped out of the boardroom, each step deliberate yet powerful, leaving behind stunned and frozen gazes. The room now echoed only with the rustle of papers, the tap of keyboards from assistants documenting everything, and the heavy breaths of those whose actions had just been exposed. Harrison Blake, the man who had boarded the flight confidently occupying seat 1A, was now bewildered, eyes wide, mouth agape. His false authority dissolved like mist under the light of reality. He was nothing more than prey in Vanessa's meticulously crafted plan. As Blake was escorted out by security, muttering threats under his breath, Vanessa remained unmoved. She knew that his shouts and immediate reactions only highlighted his weakness and lack of preparation. Step by step, he had walked into a trap prepared by quiet, sharp, and decisive power. This was the pinnacle moment everyone who had underestimated her was witnessing true authority manifest. Ben Harper, 24, stood tucked in a corner, a mixture of exhilaration and tension coursing through him. He had done everything correctly, recording every infraction without missing a detail. Vanessa turned to Ben, her gaze stern, yet full of trust. "Ben, you did well. Your integrity today has protected Skybridge from wrongdoing and safeguarded Project Atlas. You deserve this reward." Ben's eyes widened, heart racing. Never before had anyone in first class or on the board recognized his honesty in this way. Vanessa moved to the central table where the remaining board members were still recovering from the climax. She emphasized each word, her voice cold, yet commanding. "Project Atlas will proceed according to plan. Every interference, every violation will be addressed. Skybridge Airlines is not just an airline. It is a symbol of fairness, transparency, and properly exercised authority. No one interrupted. No sighs were heard, every silence serving as testament to her power and strategy." Meanwhile, Blake still trembled, unable to believe his eyes. He had thought Seat 1A a platinum card, and wealth would grant him ultimate authority. But Vanessa had proven that real power resides in intellect, meticulous observation, and precise action. Every derisive word, every oppressive gesture was now evidence against him. He had undone his own authority through arrogance and ignorance. Cynthia Harris, 39 senior purser, stood frozen, face pale. She had once taken pride in managing the cabin, coercing passengers to yield their seats, and manipulating staff behavior. But now all of that had collapsed. Vanessa's gaze penetrated every intention, causing her to shiver. Pride was gone, replaced by simmering fear. Every previous abuse of power, every misjudged decision had been exposed. Vanessa turned to Ben Harper, her voice deep and compelling. "You will serve as a model for the entire airline. Your honesty, observation, and courage are exactly what Skybridge needs. I want you to lead the new cabin training program, where each employee will be guided according to proper standards and fairness." Ben inhaled deeply, eyes shining with pride. From a young flight attendant, he was instantly elevated to a symbol of integrity and fairness within the airline. The board members were impressed. Robert Pace, the official CEO, exhaling in awe. He had never witnessed power expressed so subtly, quietly, yet overwhelmingly. Every decision, every action of Vanessa today proved that victory does not require noise. Quiet, sharp, and precise authority was what truly governed the airline. Blake was taken to a private waiting room. Forehead, sweaty hands, trembling confidence evaporated. Every threat, every contemptuous glance now rendered useless. Everything he had relied upon to exert influence was now entirely reversed. Vanessa had turned his mockery into fuel, transforming it into a weapon for Project Atlas and her own authority. Cynthia Harris stood outside the boardroom. Guilt rising. Every prior misconduct, every manipulation, every abuse she had committed now stood as irrefutable evidence. She trembled, realizing that actions once deemed harmless could now destroy her career and reputation. Vanessa did not need to shout or display anger. Her piercing gaze and meticulous preparation had controlled the entire situation. Vanessa returned to the table, emphasizing, "Those who act with integrity will be protected and respected. Those who abuse authority or discriminate will face strict consequences. This is a lesson for all of Skybridge. Airline's fairness and transparency are not optional, they are mandatory." The room fell silent like a heavy curtain, allowing everyone to feel the full weight of her authority. Ben Harper was invited to stand, receiving his well-deserved recognition. His eyes shone heart-racing. From an ordinary flight attendant, he was now the leader of the cabin training program, a symbol of honesty, courage, and ethics. This was not just a personal victory. It was proof that integrity and meticulous observation could change an entire system. Blake, still trembling in the waiting room, realized that his false authority had been completely destroyed. Every arrogant action, every mocking word, every oppressive gesture had become evidence against him. No one could save him. Vanessa had transformed humiliation into a weapon, mockery into strategy, and Project Atlas would proceed according to plan, secure and untouchable. As the meeting concluded, Vanessa stood in the room once more, emphasizing true power does not lie in titles, wealth, or noise. It lies in observation, calculation, and acting at the right moment. Those who are honest and courageous will be protected. Those who abuse authority or discriminate will face consequences. Her words rang out like a declaration, allowing everyone in the room to fully grasp the silent yet overwhelming power she commanded. Vanessa looked out the windows of the Skybridge headquarters, the grey London morning light reflecting off the buildings, and a faint smile crossed her lips. Today's climax had ended, but her quiet authority continued to radiate. Those who had underestimated her had to bow the honest, like Ben were promoted, and Skybridge Airlines had entered a new era, transparent, fair, and led by true power. After the tense meeting at Skybridge Airlines headquarters, Vanessa Mitchell did not return to her office to relax or celebrate. She walked straight to the operations room, where large screens displayed the airline's full operational data, from flight schedules to customer feedback. Every metric, every report was a link in the restructuring plan she had prepared for months. Determination shone in her face, eyes cold yet blazing with steel resolve. Vanessa knew that power does not end after a meeting. It was only beginning. Blake Harrison. Blake now sat isolated in a small room, contained by Skybridge's security system, still not comprehending what had transpired. Part of him hoped, part of him trembled. Just a few hours ago, he believed he controlled everything. But his false authority, based on a platinum card, first-class seating money and financial prestige, had completely evaporated. Vanessa, with calm precision and meticulous preparation, had transformed all his arrogance into fuel for her strategy. Meanwhile, Ben Harper stood beside her, eyes bright. He had completed his task on the flight, documenting every misdeed, every derisive comment, and submitting an accurate report to Vanessa. Now he witnessed the comprehensive transformation of Skybridge Airlines, a possibility few could imagine. Vanessa turned to him, her gaze serious yet full of trust. Ben, today, you are not just a witness. You are a symbol of integrity and fairness. I want you to lead the new cabin training program, ensuring every employee understands that true power lies in respect and responsibility, not in first-class seats or money. Ben inhaled deeply, eyes shining with pride. From a young flight attendant, he had instantly become a figurehead of ethics and fairness within the airline. At the same time, all first-class cabin staff, including Cynthia Harris, 39, and the crew who had accompanied Blake, were summoned to a separate meeting. Every gaze was uneasy sweat beading on foreheads, lips pressed tight. Cynthia tried to maintain composure, but every step and glance from Vanessa made her realize that the authority she once held had been completely overturned. The manipulations, abuses of power, and discriminatory actions she had executed were now irrefutable evidence. Vanessa began announcing the reforms every first-class cabin employee would undergo mandatory training in service passenger respect and adherence to ethical standards. Anyone violating these policies would face strict consequences, including immediate termination if necessary. Blake Capital, for interfering with Project Atlas, would face scrutiny, and all related contracts and privileges would be suspended. Each word and directive from Vanessa cut sharply, like a blade through the arrogance and false authority of the abusers. Outside investors monitoring from offices in New York and Europe began to notice the changes at Skybridge Airlines. Vanessa's emails were sent to major shareholders detailing Blake's actions and all evidence of discrimination and improper interference. Within minutes, the first reactions came. Investment funds began withdrawing from Blake Capital, concerned about reputational and legal risk. Blake began to realize there was no escape. His false authority, once so confidently wielded, had collapsed entirely. Vanessa looked at the screens in the operations room. Data from the flight cabin reports, Ben Harper's documentation, and previous complaints were compiled into a comprehensive database. Every act of abuse, every instance of discrimination, could be pursued legally and internally. She emphasized every metric, every action. No detail was overlooked. This was quiet, yet maximal authority. Meanwhile, Blake sat in the isolation room, lips pressed tight hands, trembling, facing the harsh truth he had destroyed his own authority through arrogance, underestimation of others, and lack of foresight. Every minor action on the plane, every mocking word toward Vanessa, now served as evidence against him. No lawyer, no financial status, no first-class seat could save him. Cynthia Harris stood outside the separate meeting room, pale, overwhelmed by guilt. She realized that every abuse, manipulation, and oppression she had committed was now exposed. There was no denial, no justification possible. Vanessa did not need to shout. Her piercing gaze, deliberate steps, and meticulous plan controlled the entire situation. Her quiet power dominated completely. Ben Harper was invited to stand before the board, receiving his well-deserved recognition promotion to lead the new cabin training program. His eyes shone heart-racing. From a young flight attendant, now witnessing Vanessa's true authority, he became the emblem of ethics, honesty, and courage within the airline. This was not just a personal victory, but proof that integrity and meticulous observation can transform an entire system of power. Vanessa turned to Blake, stepping in front of him, voice sharp as steel. "You thought you could belittle me, force me from my seat, and disrupt Project Atlas. You were wrong. Power does not reside in a suit, a platinum card, or reputation. It resides in preparation, observation, and precise action. You have destroyed your own authority." Blake trembled, unable to speak. Every arrogant action, every mocking word, every oppressive gesture had now become evidence against him. There was no escape. Vanessa had transformed his humiliation and arrogance into strategy, authority, and victory. Vanessa returned to the board table, emphasizing to the council, "Skybridge Airlines will be guided by fairness and transparency. Those who are honest and courageous will be protected." Those who abuse authority or discriminate will face consequences. This is a turning point for the company's culture and governance. Every gaze in the room focused on her silent, sensing, absolute authority overwhelming the entire space. The entire first-class system, Blake Capital, and all staff were entering a new era, transparent, fair, and led by real authority. Vanessa Mitchell, through calm, meticulous preparation and observation, had turned those who underestimated her into pawns on her chessboard, and Project Atlas would proceed flawlessly, securely, and untouchably. A faint smile crossed Vanessa's lips. Today's climax had ended, but her quiet authority continued to radiate, forcing all who had once underestimated her to bow. Skybridge Airlines entered a new era where fairness, transparency, and true power were established. Every plan, every observation, every restraint had transformed into perfect victory. Harrison Blake stepped out of the Skybridge Airlines headquarters the early London morning light, reflecting off the streets, exposing his total collapse. The Xenia suit, the platinum card, all the symbols he had relied on to assert power, were now empty objects. He trembled, lips pressed tight, each step heavy, as if the entire world opposed him. Every gaze from employees, from Ben Harper, from investors watching via live feed, served as a reminder his false authority had completely evaporated. Vanessa Mitchell stood by the window, hand resting on the glass, looking down at the parking area, where the black Bentley still waited. In that moment, all of Blake's humiliation, arrogance, and false power flashed through her mind. Yet instead of reveling, Vanessa felt a profound calm. This was quiet, precise, and fully controlled power. She knew that what she had done was not merely revenge, but the creation of a transparent, fair, and untouchable system. Ben Harper, 24, stood beside her, still in awe of what had just unfolded. Every report he had filed, every honest observation, was now recognized. He watched Blake being led away by security pride and admiration in his eyes. Vanessa turned to him, voice steady, yet filled with trust. Ben, today you not only fulfilled your duty, but you proved that integrity and courage can change an entire system. You deserve to lead the new cabin training program. Every employee will look to you as an example. In the offices, Robert Pace, the official CEO, and the entire board were still stunned. All data records, video, and reports had been flawlessly compiled by Vanessa. Project Atlas remained secure in her hands, while Blake Capital began to crumble in the shadows. Major investors withdrew funding, concerned about reputational and legal risk. Blake, who once believed he held ultimate power, was now a puppet in the plan Vanessa had orchestrated. Cynthia Harris, senior purser, 39, stood outside, pale guilt flooding through her. Every act of manipulation, passenger disdain, and abuse of authority had been exposed. She trembled, realizing that her reputation and false power had been destroyed within hours. Vanessa did not need to yell. A piercing gaze, deliberate steps, and meticulous preparation had controlled the entire situation. Vanessa returned to the boardroom, emphasizing each word. Those who act with integrity will be protected and respected. Those who abuse authority or discriminate will face strict consequences. This is a lesson for all of Skybridge Airlines. Fairness and transparency are not optional. They are mandatory. The room was silent, like a heavy curtain, allowing everyone to fully feel her absolute authority. Ben Harper was invited to stand, receiving his well-deserved recognition promotion to lead the new cabin training program. His eyes shone heart-racing. From a young flight attendant, witnessing Vanessa's true power, he had become a symbol of ethics, honesty, and courage. This was not just a personal victory. It was proof that integrity and careful observation can transform an entire power structure. Vanessa turned to Blake, stepping in front of him, voice sharp as steel. "You thought you could belittle me, force me from my seat, and disrupt Project Atlas. You were wrong. Power does not reside in a suit, a platinum card, or reputation. It resides in preparation, observation, and precise action. You have destroyed your own authority." Blake trembled, unable to speak. Every arrogant action, every mocking word, every oppressive gesture had now become evidence against him. There was no escape. Vanessa had transformed his humiliation and arrogance into strategy, authority, and victory. Vanessa returned to the board table, reinforcing to the council, Skybridge Airlines will be guided by fairness and transparency. Those who are honest and courageous will be protected. Those who abuse authority or discriminate will face strict consequences. Project Atlas will proceed flawlessly, and anyone attempting interference will pay. All eyes focused on her silent feeling, the absolute authority that dominated the room. The entire first-class system, Blake Capital, and all employees were entering a new era, transparent, fair, and governed by true authority. Vanessa Mitchell, through calm, meticulous preparation and observation, had turned those who underestimated her into pawns on her chessboard, and Project Atlas would proceed perfectly securely and untouchably. A faint smile crossed Vanessa's lips. Today's climax had concluded, but her quiet authority continued to radiate, forcing all who had once underestimated her to bow. Skybridge Airlines had entered a new era where fairness, transparency, and real power were firmly established. Every plan, every observation, every restraint had transformed into perfect victory, and Project Atlas, the operation reshaping the European airline industry, now rested in her hands, secure, inviolable, and a testament to Vanessa Mitchell's silent yet overwhelming authority. Vanessa Mitchell did not rest after Project Atlas was completed. The Bentley Mulsanne, parked outside Skybridge Airlines headquarters, was just the first step in the comprehensive overhaul she had been planning for months. She walked into the operations room where large screens displayed every flight schedule, customer report, and cabin feedback. Every metric was a link in her plan, and this time no detail was overlooked. Her power was no longer personal. It was systemic, capable of transforming the entire airline. The room was filled with board members and department directors. Robert Pace, the official CEO, stood beside the table, eyes wide with amazement and respect. Sarah Jenkins, head of cabin services, still trembled, lips pressed tight. She understood that every prior misdeed, every contemptuous act she had committed, had now become irrefutable evidence of Vanessa's authority and preparation. Vanessa began presenting her comprehensive reform plan. Effective immediately, all conduct in first class and economy cabins and across all customer service departments will be closely monitored. All employees will undergo mandatory training in service fairness and passenger respect. Any abuse of authority, favoritism, or discrimination will be met with strict consequences, including immediate termination if necessary. Each word landed sharp as a blade, leaving the room silent hearts racing, no one daring to interrupt. Ben Harper, 24, stood beside her, still in awe. From a young flight attendant, he had now become a symbol of integrity and ethics across the airline. Vanessa turned to him, gaze serious yet full of trust. "Ben, you will lead the new cabin training program. You will teach employees that true power lies in honesty, Careful observation and responsibility, not first-class seats or platinum cards. Ben inhaled deeply, eyes shining with pride. Board members watched Vanessa's every move. They realized her power did not rest only in handling Blake and Cynthia Harris, but in her ability to transform the entire system. Vanessa continued, "I want all cabin reports, customer feedback and complaints from now on to be compiled and analyzed under the new standards. No one is allowed to abuse authority or show favoritism. This is not just a reform, it is a cultural reset for the airline." Cynthia Harris stood silently pale. She realized that every prior misconduct was exposed. The whispers and scrutinizing glances from other employees emphasized that her previous authority had been completely overturned. Vanessa did not need to shout or show anger. A piercing gaze and meticulous plan had completely controlled the situation. Blake, observing remotely via live feed, realized he was entirely under her control. His false authority built on money and first-class privileges had evaporated. Every phone call, every derisive action, every coercive gesture now served as evidence against him. There was no escape. All contracts and privileges related to Skybridge Capital were suspended, and investors began pulling funds. Vanessa continued implementing changes. The cabin system was restructured. Each flight now followed specific service standards. Every action was recorded, evaluated, and immediately addressed. The new cabin training program led by Ben Harper emphasized honesty, responsibility, and passenger respect. This marked a turning point in the airline's culture. In the financial market, Blake Capital began to crumble. Investment funds withdrew rapidly, concerned about legal and reputational risks. Blake, once confident and arrogant, believing that first-class seats and personal power could control everything, now understood that true power doesn't rely on such symbols, but on strategy, meticulous preparation, and precise action, something Vanessa had demonstrated flawlessly. Vanessa reviewed cabin data customer records and Ben Harper's reports. Every metric was optimized for transparency and fairness. Employee actions now had to follow new rules. Those who acted honestly would be protected and promoted. Those who abused authority would be held accountable. This was systemic power, no longer dependent on individual status or first-class seating. Ben Harper looked at Vanessa, pride swelling. From a young flight attendant, he had become a symbol of ethics and honesty within the airline. He understood that today's integrity had changed the entire system. All cabin staff would learn from him and from Vanessa that true power doesn't lie in rank or VIP seating, but in right action and careful observation. Vanessa Mitchell, standing in the operations room viewing the entire airline on the screens, knew the reform was not yet complete, but the foundation of power was secure. Those who had underestimated her were forced to bow. Blake had completely collapsed. Cynthia Harris faced severe consequences. Ben Harper was promoted and became a role model for all employees. Project Atlas would proceed flawlessly, and Skybridge Airlines had entered a new era, transparent, fair, and guided by true authority. A faint smile crossed Vanessa's lips. Today's climax had ended, but her quiet, sharp, and overwhelming power continued to radiate. All who had once underestimated or abused authority had to bow. Every strategy, every restraint, every observation had transformed into perfect victory. Skybridge Airlines was no longer merely an airline. It had become a living testament to silent yet maximal power, and Project Atlas stood as proof of Vanessa Mitchell's absolute and undeniable authority. The London sun shone brilliantly over the Skybridge Airlines headquarters, reflecting off the towering glass, as if to underscore Vanessa Mitchell's absolute authority. She stood on the balcony, surveying the tarmac, every propeller, every cabin door, every employee, all under her control. From seat 22B on the flight to the boardroom from Ben Harper to the entire board of directors, every piece of the plan had fallen perfectly into place. Project Atlas had succeeded, but more importantly, the airline's power structure and culture had been reshaped from the ground up. Harrison Blake was no longer the arrogant man who had boarded first class. He was confined in a private office, attempting to gather documents. But every effort was futile. Investors withdrew, funding contracts were suspended, and his personal reputation crumbled. Blake realized that what he had once considered power, the suit, the VIP seat, the platinum card, was not true strength. Real power lies in meticulous preparation, careful observation, strategy, and the ability to act precisely when necessary, all of which Vanessa had demonstrated flawlessly. Meanwhile, Cynthia Harris, senior purser, 39, stood silently by the table, lips pressed tight hands, trembling. Every abusive act, every mocking gesture toward first class and economy passengers now served as evidence against her. No apology or explanation could save her reputation or career. Vanessa did not need to shout or show anger, just a piercing gaze, meticulous preparation, and quiet authority had defeated all those who had once been arrogant. Ben Harper, 24, stepped up to the main boardroom, eyes bright, heart racing. He received his well-earned recognition promotion to lead the new cabin training program, becoming the airline's symbol of honesty and ethics. From a young flight attendant, witnessing Vanessa's true authority, he had become an inspiration to all employees, proof that integrity and courage can transform an entire system. He looked at Vanessa with reverence, understanding that every observation, every record, every act of honesty had created a historic turning point. Vanessa moved through the rooms, observing cabin staff, passengers, and every report on the operation screens. Everything ran smoothly. No more abuses, no more bias. Every detail, every procedure, every action had been standardized. Her authority was now systemic rather than personal. Each employee understood that integrity, responsibility, and fairness were the keys to their success. In the financial market, Blake Capital collapsed completely. Major investors withdrew funding, contracts were terminated, and Harrison Blake's personal reputation became a disaster. Once arrogant thinking, first-class seats, and wealth could dominate everything, he now understood that true power does not rely on those things, but on strategy, meticulous preparation, and precise execution, all of which Vanessa had proven perfectly. Vanessa reviewed cabin data, customer records, and Ben Harper's reports. Every metric was optimized for transparency and fairness. Every employee action now followed the new rules. Those who acted honestly would be protected and promoted. Those who abused authority would be held accountable. This was systemic power, no longer dependent on individual status or first-class seating. Ben Harper looked at Vanessa, pride swelling. From a young flight attendant, he had become a symbol of ethics and honesty within the airline. He understood that integrity today had transformed the entire system. All cabin staff would learn from him and Vanessa that true power does not lie in titles or VIP seats, but in correct action and careful observation. Vanessa Mitchell, standing in the operations room, overseeing the entire airline on the screens, knew that the reform was not yet complete, but the foundation of authority was solid. Those who had underestimated her had to bow. Blake had completely collapsed. Cynthia Harris faced severe consequences. Ben Harper was promoted and became a role model for all employees. Project Atlas would proceed flawlessly, and Skybridge Airlines had entered a new era, transparent, fair, and guided by true authority. A faint smile crossed Vanessa's lips. Today's climax had passed, but her quiet, sharp, and overwhelming power continued to radiate. All who had once underestimated or abused authority had to bow. Every strategy, every observation, every restraint had transformed into perfect victory. Skybridge Airlines was no longer merely an airline. It was a living testament to quiet yet maximal power, and Project Atlas stood as proof of Vanessa Mitchell's absolute and undeniable authority. Looking back at the entire journey of Vanessa Mitchell, from the moment she was underestimated in seat 22B to standing before the full board and leadership of Skybridge Airlines, one important truth becomes clear. True power does not lie in titles, first-class seats, or platinum cards, but in meticulous observation, patience, sharp strategy, and the ability to act at precisely the right moment. A great leader is not someone who shouts, imposes, or flaunts authority, but someone who knows how to turn humiliation, challenges, and injustice into opportunities to establish order, transform systems, and create a fair environment for all. Vanessa did not simply take revenge on the arrogant. She established a new standard where honesty and fairness guide every action, turning the virtuous into symbols and the abusive into cautionary lessons. If this story resonates with you, like the video to spread the message about responsible power and fairness in the workplace. Subscribe to the channel to follow more stories where the arrogant must bow before those who understand their true value and where right actions are celebrated. Don't forget to leave a comment with the phrase, "Bow down," reminding each other that true power is not for those who look down on others, but for those who are patient, intelligent, and brave enough to act at the right moment. Remember, sometimes silence, careful observation, and thorough preparation are more powerful than any shouting or superficial authority. True power is always quiet, sharp, and undeniable.